Ukraine has just humiliated Russia with an $11 shot that rewrites the rules of modern warfare. For months, headlines around the world have focused on Russia's growing reliance on old weapons. Dusty tanks rolled out of storage, Soviet-era shells hauled for forgotten warehouses, and equipment that seems more fit for a museum than a battlefield. Analysts joked, critics scoffed, but Moscow paraded these relics as proof of its supposed endless reserves. But here's the irony. Ukraine has been using old weapons too. The crucial difference is not in the age of the technology, but in the way it is used. Russia deploys antiques to project an image of strength, to bluff both its citizens and its enemies into believing its arsenal is limitless. Ukraine, on the other hand, squeezes every ounce of utility out of the past, turning forgotten tools into lethal instruments of improvisation. This distinction came into focus in September, during one of the most chaotic nights Kiev had seen since the beginning of the war. Sirens howled, explosions rattled the city, and Russia unleashed what analysts called its single largest air attack of the war so far. Yet, amid that storm, a century-old machine gun, the kind you might expect to see in black and white footage from World War I, carved its name into the story of 21st century warfare. Since February 2022, when Russian troops poured over Ukraine's borders in what the Kremlin believed would be a lightning-fast operation, the war has been filled with contradictions. Russia's military machine, long thought to be one of the most powerful on Earth, turned out to be riddled with cracks, corruption, logistical failures, and a shocking inability to adapt. Ukraine, meanwhile, compensated for its smaller size and lack of resources with ingenuity. From commercial drones converted into deadly strike platforms, to smartphone apps guiding artillery fire, Ukrainian forces demonstrated again and again that creativity could be just as important as raw numbers. But when it came to air defense, things got especially complicated. Russia unleashed wave after wave of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and kamikaze drones, each designed to overwhelm the layered protection that Ukraine had painstakingly built with Western help. Systems like the American-made Patriot or the German Iris-T became Kiev's shield. They were effective, sometimes spectacularly so, but also expensive, rare, and limited in number. Every interception by Patriot could cost several $1,000,000. This imbalance created a brutal arithmetic. Russia could manufacture and launch hundreds of cheap drones and relatively low-cost missiles. Ukraine had to respond with advanced interceptors that cost exponentially more. Economists call this the cost-exchange ratio, and for a country fighting for survival, it was unsustainable. That's where the old weapons came in. For Russia, it meant rolling out T-54 and T-55 tanks from the 1950s, vulnerable to modern anti-tank weapons and often destroyed before they even reached the front line. For Ukraine, it meant dusting off Maxim machine guns designed in the late 19th century. The question wasn't whether these relics looked ridiculous on the modern battlefield. It was whether they still worked. And the Maxim worked. To understand how astonishing this story is, we need to revisit that night. On September 7th, Russia launched its most massive combined airstrike since the start of the war. According to Ukrainian sources, the attack included more than 810 drones, 4 ballistic missiles, and 9 cruise missiles. The goal was clear: exhaust Ukraine's defenses, saturate its radar, and break through the protective shield over Kiev. The effect on the ground was devastating. CNN reported that air raid sirens blared across the capital for more than 11 straight hours. Explosions rocked neighborhoods. At least 2 civilians were killed, one of them an infant. Even Kiev's central government building, long considered a symbolic target, was struck, marking the first time Russia had managed to hit it directly since the invasion began. In moments like these, when the sky is alive with threats, chaos reigns. Soldiers and volunteers are forced to make split-second decisions, often with incomplete information. And on this night, amid the roar of engines and the distant thuds of interceptors, a single air defense volunteer made a choice that no military strategist could have predicted. He reached for a Maxim machine gun. The Maxim is not just old, it is ancient by military standards. Invented in 1884 by Hiram Maxim, it was the world's first fully automatic machine gun. Powered by the energy of its own recoil and cooled by a water jacket wrapped around its barrel, it revolutionized warfare. In World War I, It earned the grim nickname of the Devil's Paintbrush, mowing down waves of soldiers in the trenches of Europe. By the 2020s, the gun should have been nothing more than a museum piece. Its bulk, its reliance on canvas ammunition belts, and its sheer weight made it seem absurd in an age of drones, satellites, and hypersonic missiles. And yet, Ukraine had kept a handful of them in storage. Reliable, easy to maintain, and firing the standard 7.62mm rounds that remained plentiful across Eastern Europe, the Maxim refused to die. For most of the war, it had been used in roles closer to its original purpose, defending trenches, cutting down infantry, or even, in some cases, shooting at low-flying drones. Russian propaganda mocked the sight of these antiques on the battlefield, portraying Ukraine as backward and desperate. But as events would show, the joke was about to flip entirely. The improbable shot. As the missiles approached Kiev, one of them, a Kh-69 cruise missile, one of Russia's newest and most advanced designs, dipped low, skimming at around 50 meters above the ground. Its stealthy shape and low altitude made it nearly invisible to radar, and even advanced systems like the Patriot struggled to lock onto it. This was the moment. The volunteer, known only by the pseudonym REC, saw the missile with his own eyes. He knew the odds. A Maxim machine gun was never designed to hit something traveling at hundreds of miles per hour. But he also knew the missile's trajectory, and in that split second, he requested permission to fire. What happened next would become legend. The Kh-69 is not just any missile. It represents the pride of Russia's modern arsenal, a cruise missile developed to rival Western designs like Britain's Storm Shadow or Germany's Taurus. Sleek, stealthy, and capable of speeds approaching 1,000 kilometers per hour, it was meant to outsmart air defenses, skim beneath radar coverage, and deliver devastating warheads on strategic targets. Ukraine had already felt its bite earlier in the war, when one strike obliterated the Tripilia thermal power plant. This was the weapon streaking toward Kiev on the night of September 7th. It should have been unstoppable. The volunteer who faced it goes by the pseudonym REC. In his interview with Ukrinform, he described the decision to use the Maxim as both desperate and practical. The missile's unusual trajectory, low, close, and visible, made larger systems struggle to respond in time. The Maxim, though crude, offered something those systems could not: immediate, direct firepower from the ground. Once he received permission, REC unleashed a burst of 7.62mm rounds. The Maxim rattled and shook, spitting fire into the night sky. To anyone watching, it might have looked absurd, a weapon from 1914 firing at a missile from 2024. But history often rewards audacity. Rex saw smoke trailing from the Kh-69. The missile veered, its path broken. Moments later, it crash-landed just a few hundred meters from his position. Against every law of probability, a World War I gun had brought down one of Russia's most advanced cruise missiles. Rek himself admitted it was a 1 in 1,000 shot, and he wasn't exaggerating. The Kh-69's speed, estimated at around 340 miles per hour during its approach, should have made it impossible for the Maxim to land a hit. The gun fires at a rate of up to 600 rounds per minute, but it lacks the advanced targeting systems or radar guidance of modern air defense. Hitting a fast-moving object at such low altitude required not just skill, but also extraordinary luck. Yet, sometimes, luck changes the narrative of war. Consider the cost comparison. Rek-fired ammunition worth 460 hryvnias, about $11.15. The missile he destroyed cost Russia approximately $500,000. That is a ratio of 44,843 to 1. A David and Goliath calculation if there ever was one. For Ukraine, struggling to stretch every dollar of Western aid, the symbolism was powerful. For Russia, the embarrassment was priceless. When Ukrainian forces later examined the downed Kh-69, they discovered it carried a cluster warhead. Unlike a traditional explosive designed to detonate on impact, a cluster warhead scatters dozens of smaller submunitions across a wide area. Each one may weigh less than 20 kilograms, but together, they turn a city block into a death zone. Cars shredded, buildings punctured, civilians caught in lethal fragments. This was the fate Kiev narrowly avoided. Rek himself acknowledged the gravity. Had it hit a densely populated area, the consequences would have been serious. He wasn't exaggerating. cluster munitions are designed for maximum disruption against soft targets, and in an urban setting, the casualties could have been catastrophic. So yes, the Maxim's success was partly luck, but it was also salvation. To understand how this was even possible, we need to look at the weapon itself. The Maxim, designed by Hiram Maxim in 1884, was the first fully automatic machine gun. Using recoil to cycle rounds and a water jacket to cool the barrel, it transformed the battlefields of World War I into slaughterhouses. At its peak, a single Maxim could unleash firepower equal to 60 riflemen. By modern standards, it is cumbersome and outdated. It needs a crew of several men to operate efficiently, is fed by heavy canvas belts, and is transported on a wheeled mount. Yet, in Ukraine, soldiers rediscovered its virtues. It is accurate. It has manageable recoil. It uses ammunition still abundant in post-Soviet stockpiles. And perhaps most importantly, it has no electronics, meaning Russia's sophisticated jamming and electronic warfare cannot touch it. In a war where drones jam signals and GPS is scrambled, the Maxim's simplicity has become its hidden strength. Russian propaganda has often mocked Ukraine for deploying Maxim guns, pointing to photographs as proof that Kiev is weak and backward. But the events of September turned that mockery into humiliation. Russia lost a $500,000 missile to a weapon more than a century old. A symbol of Putin's modern war machine was defeated by a relic of the Tsars. The optics could not be worse for Moscow. On Russian state TV, commentators who once sneered at the sight of Maxims on the battlefield now face the uncomfortable reality. Those antiques had succeeded where entire batteries of advanced systems might have failed. And here's where we turn it to you, the viewer. What does this tell us about the future of war? Do you believe that innovation and creativity will always find a way to beat expensive technology? Or was this just a lucky shot never to be repeated? Leave your thoughts below, because this is not just a quirky anecdote. It's a case study in how wars may be fought in the decades to come. The shot fired by REC was not just about saving Kiev that night. It symbolized the wider struggle, Ukraine making the most of what it has, Russia pouring money into advanced weapons only to see them undone by improvisation. It also revealed a brutal truth about the economics of war. Russia can afford to launch hundreds of missiles, but each loss stings, not just financially, but reputationally. Ukraine, with far fewer resources, must improvise, adapt, and turn every available weapon into a potential tool of survival. The Maxim, in this sense, is more than a gun. It is a metaphor, old strength reshaped for new battles. The story of a Maxim machine gun downing a KH-69 is more than a battlefield anecdote. It is a parable of modern conflict, where technology and ingenuity clash in ways no strategist could fully anticipate. For Ukraine, the event became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the most advanced weapon can be undone by determination, adaptability, and a little bit of luck. For Russia, it was humiliation. A missile still in testing phases as recently as 2023, designed for its most advanced jets, fell to a weapon that predates the Soviet Union itself. It underscored what critics have long argued. Moscow's claims of technological superiority are fragile. If a century-old gun can expose vulnerabilities, what does that say about the rest of its arsenal? On a global level, the lesson resonates far beyond Eastern Europe. Modern warfare has become a contest not only of resources but of creativity. The United States, China, NATO allies, and emerging powers are all investing billions in hypersonic missiles, artificial intelligence, and next-generation drones. Yet the Ukrainian example reminds us that high-tech solutions can be disrupted by low-tech improvisation. History is full of such reversals. The Viet Cong with bamboo traps against American helicopters, Afghan fighters with RPGs against Soviet armor, and now a Ukrainian volunteer with a Maxim against a KH-69. This also raises uncomfortable questions about the cost of war. Western taxpayers watch billions flow into sophisticated defense systems, while a single burst of fire from an old machine gun achieves the same result for $11. Military planners cannot ignore that economics will increasingly shape conflicts as much as firepower. But perhaps the greatest impact is psychological. For Ukrainians, Rek's shot is a morale boost, proof that the underdog can still surprise. For Russians, it is a sobering reminder that no weapon, however advanced, is invincible. And for the rest of the world, it is a wake-up call. Innovation does not always mean new. Sometimes it means using the old in ways no one expects. As IEC himself put it, there is no rest. More drones, more missiles, more nights of vigilance. But his story will endure. The Maxim's rattle in the night is now part of modern history, a reminder that even relics can shape the future. And so the question lingers, if a 19th century gun can bring down a 21st century missile, what other surprises might be waiting in the shadows of the next war?